Welcome to the Wines of Heracles Part 2, the last six labors. Very excited to be here. We're all all of us are sort of barely made it to tonight's tasting from different directions, from
Mhm.
different parts of the country, but I think we're all somehow managed to convene here tonight, and we're glad that you're able to join us as well. Um, so I think most everyone who will be watching the video also was a member for the first set of Heracles labors, the first six. So this is just a continuation of that. So we'll be going through four club wines that line up, kind of with the six labors. You know, 1.5 labors per wine, and then we'll have two special offer wines, which many of you have been participating in that program, which is really cool. And I think as we've gotten we formalized that where there's two available each time. I think more people have been signing up. So if you haven't been getting those special offers, can sort of humbly say you've been missing out because we've had some really fantastic wines that Tia and Ryan have been putting together that just cover some ground in terms of price point and in terms of geography that maybe we can't cover with the club. So they're always wines we're super excited about. So we'll be doing those as well. So again, because we did all the introduction to Heracles before and sort of the preliminary work, we're just gonna go ahead and jump right in to this one with the first wine of the evening, which is this 2019 Karavitakis Kotsefali. And I believe Mavro Tragano, and I'm not sure who's taking this wine, Ryan or T.
That'll be me. I'll jump in there, Jeff. Thanks very much. Yep. So as Jeff said, this is from Karavitakis in Crete. So we're still in Greece here, and this is a blend of Kotsefali and Mavro Tragano called Klima is the name of the wine. The two grapes are native Cretan varieties. Kotsefali is probably the best known Cretan red. In this case, is 90% of the blend here, and Kotsefali is a grape that it brings a lot of the fruit, a lot of the power, and the kind of depth of layers of fruit to most typical Cretan blends. But unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of color. It's a wine that generates a lot of sugar, but the skins are pretty thin, and it doesn't actually bring a lot of those anthocyanins, those pigment molecules that basically bring that deep red color. So you'll very, very often see it blended with a number of different grapes. The two most common ones actually would number one would be Mandalaria, which we've had some I think some Cozzafali Mandalarias in recent past, but in this case we have Mavro Tragano, and then there's also you'll also see Syrah sometimes mixed in there as well, and a few other local native varieties. But in this case, it's 90% Cozzafali and 10% Mavro Tragano, which is gonna that 10% brings a little bit more of that structure, a little more of the tannin, a little more kind of that balance to just kind of like that pure juicy fruitiness of the Colzefali. Very easy to drink, just a nice kind of like good fun sort of I'd say kind of bistro red. Definitely something that's pretty easy to just plop down on a table and just enjoy with pretty much any meal, but or by itself. Um, Madro Tragano, just a little bit of fun facts. The name Madro meaning black, and Tragano actually means crisp. So it's like a black crisp grape that basically has this kind of brightness and freshness to it. Again, kind of in this sort of balancing of the Cozzafali role there. So, but yeah, the style of the wine definitely a lot of that kind of dark fruit, a little bit of kind of some spices, pepper, little earthy elements to it. But overall, just a very versatile wine. Something that really represents a lot of the kind of blends that we see out of Greece or on a lot of the islands. Whereas sometimes the whites can get a little bit more complex and a little bit bigger. The reds a lot of times are a little bit more kind of intended to be fresh because Crete gets very hot, and this is from Pisa in the middle of Greece, where you have a lot of those like white limestone rocks. So it can get pretty warm there especially in the height of summer. So you want a red that's not going to be super super big or super super tannic. But in general, yeah, just a really fun wine.
I don't know if we've ever gone through and made a list of all the Greek varieties that start with Mavro, Ryan. There are a lot. It's really interesting how a lot of the Greek grapes have the name of the name of the wine describes I mean, I guess it's familiar to us, right? With like Pinot Noir, you're like, okay, that's a dark grape or Pinot Blanc. But when you kind of get familiar with the names of the Greek varieties, which maybe a lot of people don't know, you start seeing the same sort of thing, which is cool. Like we had the Mavro Daphne, the Mavro Trigano. I know we've had four or five others,
Casino
but
Mavro is
You know,
also,
Marlboro, where they
yeah.
added like Marlboro is at the end, instead
so
of
Hmm.
being.
at some point it might be fun to get maybe Orania can help us with that, but it would be fun to get a list together of all
This
those.
sounds like another club in the making. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Mavro. Lines of the Mavros.
Wives of the Montrose.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up on that wine there, and I think I'll pass it over to Jeff. I think is it
Dana's
Jeff?
gonna give you
Actually,
Oh,
that's
Dana's
me.
first.
Yeah,
yeah,
no, thanks.
the
And I
labor.
apologize. I'm stuck in a car right now. I thought I'd be at home and I'd have a glass of wine, and all of you at home that are tasting these amazing wines. I was planning on doing it with you, but instead I'm stuck. Yeah, but I hope you can hear me, and it's great to be with everybody as always. Yeah, so moving into Crete, and actually the tie-in for this quarter's club, as Jeff said, we're moving into the next six labors of Heracles. Those of you who remember last time we left Heracles, right? He just wrapped up his sixth labor. Those first six were really based in and around the Peloponnese, and established, in a lot of ways, the nature, the background, and the sort of heroic status of Heracles. These next six labors move into a much larger world. They've become international. Heracles starts leaving mainland Greece and starts going to places like Crete, and as we'll see, to the ends of the earth, to supernatural bounds, and we'll get into all of that this evening, which is fantastic. But to start, Heracles is uh, asked by Eurystheus to essentially capture the Cretan bull, and the Cretan bull has a really interesting history that ties in, and as you guys know from previous clubs and experience, right? Greek myth is this tightly knit, woven fabric, and there's intersections in all kinds of things, right? So those of you who are thinking of Crete, you're hearing Minos. We're like, isn't that the guy with the labyrinth? And with Theseus, and yes, the same. So this is sort of a prequel to to Theseus's story, right, with Ariadne and the Minotaur. Um, the Cretan bull, its origin starts with Minos as a up and coming ruler of Crete. He's actually fighting against his brothers, and he prays to Poseidon, who is his father, to give him a sign that everyone would look at and know, right, that he is the favored king. Poseidon sends this white bull out of the sea, and it is just glorious. And the intent is that that bull will be sacrificed back to Poseidon. Um, Minos takes this bull, right? He's proclaimed king, and he just can't do it. He is about to sacrifice the bull, but it's too beautiful. It's divine, and decides at the last second to switch it with another bull. This is Greek myth. You know where this is going. Poseidon's not happy. And as a result of this transgression, he actually goes to Aphrodite and asks Aphrodite to punish Minos in kind. Aphrodite causes Minos' wife, Pasiphae, to fall in love with the bull. Um, and there's a very long history here we won't get into tonight with Daedalus, who ends up creating a contraption. The Catherine the Great story is not a true story, but you see where this is going. Anyway, Daedalus helps Pasiphae satisfy her cravings, if you will, for the bull. And, right, you guessed it, that's the story. That's where the Minotaur comes from, who's later imprisoned in the labyrinth, and Theseus has to face him. The bull, meanwhile, right, like on that main story, is wreaking havoc across Crete. And Minos is just very happy to see it go. So when Heracles shows up and says, "I need to take the bull to fulfill my seventh labor," Minos is only too glad to do it, to see it happen. Heracles captures the bull without too much trouble, brings it back to Tiryns, but Eurystheus is not able to contain it, and it gets loose again and makes its way over to Marathon, where Theseus then has to capture it. So as you can see, this intertwining, but the first step into a broader world for Heracles and his myths as we kind of make our way along this journey. So back to you guys.
Thanks, Dana. You should have your car more often. That's awesome. Now to the eighth labor, which is the mares of Diomedes. So Diomedes was a king in Thrace, ruled over a people called the Bistones. So Thrace, as many of you probably know, is a region we featured in several of our clubs actually, but is northeast of Greece. It's actually one of the sort of putative origins of the myth of Dionysus and that kind of whole early, early origins of wine story as well. So he's charged by, you remember this all kind of goes back to his cousin Eurystheus, who's assigning him these labors, as Dana mentioned. So he is assigned to go and get these mares, and what Diomedes is doing with these mares that he keeps is he's feeding guests to him. So we've talked about a lot about the Greek code of hospitality, that if someone visits you, you're supposed to behave in a certain way, and behaving in a certain way certainly doesn't entail feeding your guests to your steeds, to your horses, which is what Diomedes is doing. So anytime someone visits the court of the Bistones, Diomedes gives basically feeds them to these man-eating horses, these man-eating mares. So as Dana mentioned, there's this sort of, circular way that Greek myth works, sort of reciprocity. So when Heracles goes there, um, he he actually feeds Diomedes to the horses. Okay, so it's a sort of, he beats him with his club and stuns him, and then and feeds him to the horses. And then there's a whole, as you can read about in the write-up, there's a whole kind of battle and a melee that ensue here. And Heracles's friend Abdera was killed um, by the horses as well, and so Heracles named the city in Thrace here Abdera. So this is one of these kind of etiological stories that we talk about sometimes, like origin stories for place names that come up a lot in Greek myth. So this is the origin of the city of Abdera in Thrace. So actually I think the Abdera was killed by the Bistones, not by the horses. But anyway, so he brings the horses after he feeds Diomedes to them. He brings them back to Eurystheus, who dedicates them to the goddess Hera and sets them loose on Mount Olympus. And then, if you kind of know the later history a little bit, I think this has come up, but in our Alexander the Great club, but Alexander's famous horse, Bucephalus, was was, according to the myth, a descendant of these mares of Diomedes. So there's a kind of intersection here between myth and actual history, where these heroes like to have Alexander the Great, right, himself claimed to be descended from Zeus, but these heroes like to have a connection with the gods, with the divine. So that's kind of the story of the mares of Diomedes. So with that, we'll turn it back over to I think T is going to take us through this one.
Yep. All right. Hi everyone. So I know one thing we haven't talked about in terms of wines. I know we've had Georgian wines before, but the next two wines are wines made from cooperatives. And there's kind of a stigma in the wine industry about cooperatives where people think it's a little bit more of like bulk wine or the quality is less. But in certain regions, that's definitely not the case. If you imagine, starting your own winery is quite an expensive endeavor, buying stainless steel tanks, buying a grape sorter, buying a press, etc. I mean, this can be essentially a $300,000 to $400,000 endeavor, and that's not even including the land. You know, so for regions like Georgia or Alto Adige in the north of Italy, where land is sparse, and a lot of people don't have a lot of money to, buy the equipment, they'll form a cooperative, and they'll, you know, pull together their capital in order to like share equipment. We see this a little bit with smaller producers in Champagne as well. So the next two wines are going to be from cooperatives. So the first one is this 2020 creative wine, Saperavi from Kakheti in the east of Georgia. So as the name says, creative wine, because Georgia is probably the oldest winemaking tradition in Europe, dating back to 6000 BCE. Um, this wine is made in qvevri, which are these clay amphora that are lined with beeswax and buried underneath the ground. So the grapes are picked in October, uh, late October usually, pressed, and then they're put in these qvevri, which then traditionally, because they're buried underground, is basically temperature controlled. And the beauty of the qvevri, because it's almost a V shape, it creates this natural cyclical stirring as like the wine's fermenting over the winter. So you don't need to like, once you seal it, you don't need to do anything. You just, you don't need to press it. You don't need to do too much to it. And it's a very natural way of making wine. Um, and the Saperavi is probably one of the most intense wines I ever had. It's a lot of dark fruit, and there's this Christmas spice, nutmeg, clove, etc., and like even a little hint of pepper that makes it quite an intense wine. But it's incredibly unique, and they've been making wines this way for ages. There are wines where they buried in qvevri, and monks will walk over it. There's monastery wines, and bless it. So this is, you want to taste what an ancient how wines potentially have tasted quite a long time ago. This is how it is. Yeah, and there's such a beautiful concentration to this wine.
I'm pretty sure, T, that there's also a Journey album that is like a direct correlation to the label. This has got to be one of my favorite like
It
it's wild, man.
it
It's
does have
like,
like a 1980s kind of hair metal album cover
doesn't
sort of
it?
vibe going on.
It's a guitar
I totally
solo.
see it.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I love this wine. I thought this was just delicious, and for all the reasons T said, and and also T, maybe you mentioned, but I think the color of this wine is really striking. It's also because Saperavi, right, is one of these. Okay, correct me, guys. It's Tiantur wines or Tiantur grapes. Is that
Teinturier.
Teinturier? Thank
Yeah,
you. I always screw
absolutely. Yeah.
that up. So, right, one of the varietals where the flesh itself is actually red, right? So, I always find that, like, I don't know, am I wrong? Like, maybe it's just my brain doing it, but every time I see that, it just seems a little bit like more vivid or a little bit of a different color. But it could be, just placebo effect. I don't know.
No, you're not wrong, Dana. If you ever get your hands on some Teinturier grapes that are that are fresh grapes and you crush it, like there's this like electric magenta super intense color that because like you said, the flesh and the juice actually has color, whereas most normal red grapes, what we call red grapes, the flesh and the juice doesn't have color. And but yeah, when you crush some of these in your hands, sometimes I mean it's like your hands are stained like instantly. And but they have this like vibrant, I always think of it as this kind of almost like a sometimes like a yeah, magenta, dark, purple sort of color that you just can't
Mm,
get in non-Teinturier varieties.
mm,
It's really striking. So other famous Teinturier varieties. Let's see, Alicante Boucher is another one that we had, I think, in the last club.
Right.
That's a Teinturier variety. There's not a lot of them that are widely used, but you do definitely still encounter them
Yeah, they're
fairly
often,
regularly.
and it's rare to have one of these Teinturier grapes that, like, in a pure form, because they're often used, for example, Alicante Boucher, it's often used as a blending grape to give more color to a red wine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This wine was really delicious as well, Dana. And I found like you said, it has like an extremely intense flavor and aroma, which it does. But I also found like it's a fairly, I mean, the body is not super heavy. So you kind of expect that, right? You're, oh, this is going to be something that's overwhelming, but it's actually has a really nice, delicate quality as well. I think would be a an outstanding food wine as
So
well.
true.
Um,
It's, a lot of times, right, with Qvevri Ryan's, because you're throwing in the stems, you're throwing in so much, right? You get that highly tannic. I didn't get a tremendous amount of tannin off of this at all, right? I agree with you. It was just very approachable.
yeah, delicious, delicious wine. Yeah. So we'll move there. This is a picture, by the way, of our trip to Georgia. I don't now I'm kind of it's been so long ago, I don't even remember what year that was. Dana, to you, was that 2019?
I
I
think it was
2019. No,
2017
it's
or
2019.
2018.
Yeah.
18, yeah. I think we just
2017 or 2018. It was
Three,
definitely
three
before
different
COVID.
answers here.
yeah.
Ah!
But we got to see and taste a lot of these wines on the ground there. It's amazing. Um, so this is a picture of the of Garyon. Dana's going to talk about in a moment. But before that, I'm going to just kind of introduce you to the story of the Belt of Hippolyte. So Heracles' next labor, the ninth labor, is to travel actually to maybe Georgia, maybe one of the regions around Georgia, like Armenia, Azerbaijan, somewhere along the Black Sea coast, in this kind of homeland of ancient wine, a region inhabited by the Amazons, right? Which are a sort of there's so much speculation about whether this is an actual tribe of people, a matriarchal society, or whether there's some kind of some kind of historical basis to them. Whether or not we're not going to get into that, it's not really a solvable problem, but it is a really interesting group of women who appear in all kinds of different myths, right? With Theseus, we still need to do a club on Theseus, of course, comes into the Amazon story, as do a lot of other heroes. But they're the from what we know about them, at least from the myth, they were centered on this area around the Black Sea, but then expanded out to in particular the coastline of Turkey. So major later Greek cities, which is, the connection with the myths there, but Smyrna, Ephesus, they even, according to the myths, controlled Troy for a little while before the Trojan War period. So they're really influential there. And then we see them in Ephesus. We had, of course, the Temple of Artemis, who was a kind of the patron goddess of these, female warriors, was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. So the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. So by the time of Heracles' interaction with the Amazons, they had retreated back to kind of the Black Sea area, which is where he goes. And he's there to actually fetch the belt or the girdle, the war belt, essentially, of the queen of the Amazons, Hippolyte. And Eurystheus sends him there to get this because his daughter Admete desired it. So where she learned about it, I don't know off the top of my head. Dana might know, but she had heard of the fame of this girdle dispelled and asked her dad, "Hey, I want this." So he sent Heracles to get it. So when he gets there, actually Hippolyte was prepared to give it to him as a love gift, but Hera, we know, right, the goddess Hera frequently gets involved as an adversary to Heracles, so she stirs up trouble and she basically convinces the other Amazons that Heracles is there to abduct Hippolyte. So they attack, right? So there's this whole kind of battle that takes place, and Hippolyte is tragically killed in the battle. So she tragically dies as a result of this. As a result of this, so he gets the belt anyway afterward, and he brings it back to Eurystheus, who gives it to his daughter. So that's essentially in very short form, the myth of the belt or the girdle of Hippolyte. Okay. So Dana, I'll actually leave it on that slide if you want to take it. We have the Garyon vase up, Dana, with the Garyon with the shields that was in the write up.
Oh yeah, should we jump straight into Garion? Or are we
Yeah.
going to do a wine in between?
No, we're doing two myths per
Oh
wine.
right. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's right. Of course. Okay. So yeah, so moving on from there, as Jeff was saying. Yeah, no, Jeff, I don't know. I don't know exactly where she heard about the belt. Maybe it was a fanzine or something
Gift
like that.
gift of
Um,
originally to Hippolyte. So yeah, I don't know. That was
yeah, it's interesting. We got to pull out Robert Graves and see if we can suss that one out. But Eurystheus is yeah. I mean, after fulfilled, Eurystheus sends him out again, right? I mean, this is the thing, right? Uh, Heracles' next labor is to retrieve the cattle of Geryon, and cattle are an interesting thing in ancient Greece, right? We think about herdsmen, we think about cattle. If you look at Linear B tablets, from the late Bronze Age, from some of these Mycenaean palaces, places like Mycenae, we talked about also even earlier Minoan civilization, which was centered around Crete. The Palace of Knossos, we had a wonderful image of that actually a little bit earlier. um, Cattle were incredibly important. Cattle, of course, provide meat. They provide milk. They're seen as a source of, tremendous wealth, and there's a lot of effort. And you have to also have your stuff together to raise cattle. It's like wine in the same sense, right? We talk about wine being a product of civilization, right? That's agriculture. Cattle husbandry is a product of civilization too. And so for that reason, cattle are sacred to the gods, and particularly to Helios. Those of you who, might remember your Iliad, I shouldn't say Iliad, your Odyssey, because it was Odysseus's men, right, who ate the cattle of Helios and delayed his return even further. Helios gets involved with Heracles again with this one. Heracles is trying to actually find the location of where Geryon is, and Gerion's across the sea. He's far to the west. And Heracles is having a very difficult time getting to this island, which is called Erythea. And we're told that from a couple of different sources and different versions, both Greek and Roman, that Heracles is walking through the Libyan desert and is so frustrated at this point that he actually draws his bow with his poisoned arrows and he fires one up to the sun. And being Heracles, right, he actually comes pretty close and ends up really offending Helios, who admonishes him. And Heracles immediately understands, right? Oh my goodness, I made this terrible party foul. He, prostrates himself before Helios. And Helios actually then ends up doing him a solid and says, okay, Heracles, that's fine. I'm going to help you out. You're the son of Zeus. He's a buddy of mine. I'm going to give you my, by some accounts, golden chariot, right? But in other accounts, a golden cup or chalice that Helios uses to travel from east to west every day, right, with the sun. Heracles, accepts that gift and is able to actually get to the island, or this place. It's a mythological place. It's very common, and it's with face painters, but the location is to the west, um, and is able to actually make his way to Erythea and confronts Geryon. Well, it's not just Geryon. It's actually a two-headed dog named Orthus. That this is on an order of magnitude less than Cerberus, right? The three-headed dog, but this is a two-headed dog. And then Geryon's herdsman, Eurytion. And we're told that basically, Heracles does what Heracles does. Having, arrived, he pumps them all full of arrows and ends up kind of just kind of slaughtering everybody there. Geryon, interestingly, is he's a semi divinity. He is described in different accounts as having three heads and three bodies, but they're all connected at the waist. So very interesting. He's a descendant of Medusa. Actually, he's the grandson of Medusa. Anyway, he's dead now, and the uh, Heracles has to drive the cattle all the way back from, we're talking way to the west at this point, right? So out towards Spain even. In fact, on his way back, which he erects the Pillars of Heracles, which is, another name for the Rock of Gibraltar. So this sense that Heracles has gone again internationally far afield and now has to make his way all the way back with these cattle. Um, in some versions, the later Roman versions, Hera ends up, basically creating all kinds of problems for him on the way as he's getting these cattle and trying to herd them from Spain back to Greece. Gadflies, floods, trying to get them across rivers, all sorts of things. But he is able to successfully do it, and he brings them to his cousin Eurystheus, who promptly sacrifices them to Hera. So, stick that in your eye. Anyway, that's this. That's the end of that labor. Back to you guys.
Thanks,
All
Dana.
right, on to the next wine. This is, as we mentioned, another co-op wine from Tenerife in the Canary Islands. So this is just 100 to 150 kilometers off the coast of Morocco, but it's still part of the EU. It's Spanish. And this is a blend of Lista Negro, Negramo, and Tintilla. So there were no grapes on these volcanic islands until the 15th century when Spanish missionaries brought the grape Pais, which is the missionary grape. That's the grape they they make communion wines out of. So Pais was brought from Spain to the Canary Islands, to Chile, to South America, to the west coast of California. And the reason Pais was chosen is because it was easy to grow and it produced a lot of red plum grapes. So, it was a versatile grape that could adapt to various different environments. But the beauty of Lista Negro is that because of how remote the Canary Islands are, it kind of created kind of a Galapagos Island effect to the wines, where over generations on these volcanic terroirs, the grapes develop their own flavor, which is very different from, say, Pais that you find in Chile or Pais that you find in the west coast of California. There's not very much left of that. But the beauty of Lisa Negro is that it over generations, it created a a grape that like really embodies the terroir of Tenerife and these volcanic soils and these windswept lands where they often have to dig pits and plant grapevines in the pits because of the winds, because the winds are so strong. If you didn't plant the grapes in the pit, the winds could easily knock off the grape fruit, and you would have a ruined harvest. And the result is a really peppery. I never, you don't see this black pepper note in a red grape outside of Northern Rhone. We're talking about like Crozes Hermitage and etc. So there's a lot of plum, like really soft plum, like not overripe, but a really peppery note to it that I think is, especially for the summer, it's great with barbecue.
Yeah, absolutely too. That kind of like for me, it always like wafts between like black pepper, white pepper, and then like a little bit of peppercorns in general is kind of just like where my brain always goes with these wines. But they're really fun in the glass. They're super fun to blind taste people on who regardless, not trying to get them to guess it because good luck, but more that just to put the glass in front of somebody who's never had a wine like this before and then go, what do you think? And I would say eight to nine times out of ten people are gonna their minds are gonna be blown and they're gonna never have experienced a wine that has that kind of spice box character quite like this sometimes. So, but yeah, just super super fun wines and the connect like you're saying about like the vines being trained so low. To mitigate the wind on this kind of little volcanic spits of rock out there. The only other place that you ever really see that is in Santorini as well. and in the Greek islands. So, it's kind of this cool connection where obviously we've gone west here following the myth, of that Dana just was telling us about. And then, we still have this Greek connection from the, the winemaking here. So there's kind of like some parallels here where the traditions went west as well, for winemaking in this case. So,
Yeah, and these are, as Ryan mentioned, are bush vines. They're not even trained, they're
yeah.
not on a trellis or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, and they'll do. I know they do a lot of building of like small, like you said, like either dig a pit or they'll build small little stone walls around, either
Yeah,
in circles or in squares. These kind of like you'll see these little kind of grids, like black kind of black stone grid like vineyards around
yeah.
Tenerife and Canary Islands. They're really unique landscape.
So, I hope you guys like spicy wines because the last wine definitely had like more Christmas like cinnamon and like nutmeg, and this is like peppery. So,
Very
hopefully,
culinary. It's all very
yeah, like
culinary. Yeah.
hopefully you like spicy wines because that's the theme, unintentional theme of this club.
All right, well, we'll pass it back to Jeff, I think.
Yeah, this is to Dana actually is gonna walk us through the Dana. We have the painting up of the apples of the Hesperides here. So
Yes, fantastic. As we kind of round out our evening, and we enter the realm. We've already been in the realm of like the superheroes, right? But now we're getting into like the supernatural and the divine, and this is the sort of like journey of Heracles as he makes his way. He's already got divine parentage in the form of of Zeus as a father, but this is kind of a journey of purification, like we talked about, in the last club, and also one of entering into these new realms. And so this penultimate task that he's assigned by Eurystheus is a really great example of it. And this is to retrieve the apples of the Hesperides. The apples of the Hesperides, so these are golden apples that were, by some accounts, because they show up in different places, but in our for the purposes of tonight, they were wedding gifts from Gaia, who is Gaia, right? The Earth from the Titanic, early generation before we even have the Olympians, to Hera on her wedding day when she married Zeus. And these apples are significant in a number of ways. They are apples of eternal life. They're said to provide immortality. Um, they're also guarded by a giant 100-headed dragon named Laodon. Um, and their location is completely unknown. They're in a different dimension, right? We're like entering into the Marvel Cinematic Universe here. It's a very 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 difficult ask, and we get a sense that Eurystheus is just sort of like maybe making things up at this point. He's just like, can you get me this? And Heracles, right, continues to have to provide. So it's a tall order, but Heracles has been up to snuff at this point, and doesn't seem like he's losing steam. Um, Heracles doesn't even really know where to start on this one. It's very difficult, right? How do you pass through dimensions and enter into the realm of the divine? Um, he actually, in his journeys, comes across Prometheus, who, as many of you will recognize, was famous for providing fire to mankind and then being punished as a result of it. Zeus is pretty furious at the fact that Prometheus smuggled fire out, gave it to mankind, and punishes him by having him chained to a rock and having his liver pecked at eternally by an eagle. Heracles kind of stumbles across this scene in his journeys, and feeling like that's kind of effed up. He pulls out his bow and arrow and he shoots the eagle, and ends up freeing Prometheus. And in their discourse, and very very grateful Prometheus says, "Well, let me help you. Actually, I um, I don't know where the apples of the Hesperides are kept, but I will tell you that Atlas does, and I can guide you to him." So Heracles approaches Atlas, and says, and Atlas famously also, right, is you can think of the famous statue in Rockefeller Square. Although that Atlas is actually carrying a globe of the Earth, it's worse than that. Atlas actually carries the heavens upon his shoulders. That is his burden that he and his purpose. Um, and Heracles approaches him, kind of tentatively says, hey, Atlas, can you help me out here? Can you tell me where the apples of the Hesperides are? And Atlas says, well, you know what? I will do you one better, Heracles. Like, yeah, it's actually really far away. It's very difficult. You won't get there, and there's this 100-headed dragon. I will go there and get the apples for you. And Heracles says, great. But there's one catch. I need you to hold the heavens while I'm away. Yeah, well, what could possibly be, the problem with that? Heracles says, oh, okay, well, let's do this. And gingerly, Atlas shifts the entire weight of the heavens onto Heracles' shoulders, and in a flash, he's gone. And in a flash, he's back with the apples, as promised. And Heracles has withstood this weight, right? So this is a pretty, again, marked moment for Heracles, right? He is a hero in the sense that he is divine parentage and also human parentage, but as we'll see, he's becoming much more than that. He's literally at this point holding the entire universe on his shoulders. Atlas comes back, is prepared to give him the apples, but then sort of realizes, actually, this feels really good not having the weight of the universe on my shoulders. I don't think I want to take it back. Actually, Heracles, I think this is your task now. And Heracles says, well, you know what? You got me. That's fine. I realize now, yeah, I can totally see why you don't want to take this back. I will carry the weight of the universe forevermore. Give me one of those apples because I'll need eternity to do it. And Atlas is thrilled at Heracles' response. He then says, but Atlas, wait one second. I just need you to, I've got a wrinkle in my lion skin cloak here. Can you just hold the universe for just 1 second more? Let me readjust myself, and then I'll take on what I need to take on. And so Atlas, delighted, takes the universe back. And right, this is Greek myth. You know what happens. Heracles says, gotcha, grabs the apples, and he's gone. So this is the final, or I shouldn't say the final, the penultimate labor for Heracles. And he's able to get the apples, bring them back to Eurystheus, and finish his 11 out of 12 labors. So that's that one.
So I'm going to skip back real quick, Dana, just to show those of you. I mean, I think most of you have the write-ups, if not in front of you, you've seen them, but this is just probably the most famous image of this from the ancient world.
Yes, and some of you probably saw it like with your own eyes if you traveled with ancient wine guys on the Pan-Athenaic trip, right? This is from the Metopes at Olympia in the Temple of Zeus. And this is literally, sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to jump on you. I just got excited. Yeah, totally. Right. This is the one. So sorry, Jeff. Back
That's
to you.
the most representation of all of the labors is of course the Temple of Zeus Olympia. So yeah, so I'm going to jump right now into the last of the 12 labors, which is, as Dana has been saying, these labors get increasingly more difficult, and also kind of more requiring more of the divine side of Heracles. So there's nothing more difficult than actually having to confront death himself and death itself by going to the underworld. So this is a trope of a lot of heroes in the Greek and Roman world, is to have to go and confront a lot of things when you go to the underworld, but you're kind of confronting your past, your present, and your future, grappling with your own mortality, kind of who you are and why, and all of these difficult questions. And so there's a lot of, as we've explored in some of our clubs, and we will explore in some of our future clubs, there's a lot of famous people like Theseus, Orpheus, you probably know that myth, Aeneas on the Roman side of things. Dionysus even has to go to the underworld. So there's a lot of these different guys that end up and gals that end up down in the underworld. So Heracles goes, there's a whole we had a whole conversation about this. Where do we pick a wine from if we're gonna pick a wine that's kind of an underworld. And I'll get to this in the second of the special offer wines of why we selected the wine we did for that. But just the whole topic of like how do you get into the underworld is a really interesting one, geographically and mythologically from the ancient world. So they had a lot of they tended to be places. I mean, they tended to be caves first of all, and then they tended to be places where in a lot of cases there were fumes like kind of noxious gases and things like that that were being emitted from the earth. And in some famous examples, like ancient Greeks would go in and all the birds and animals would be dead, like in the cave. Why? Because these heavy gases would be close to the ground, so people could go in and be like, seems fine to me. But then if a goat goes in, the goat drops dead, can't breathe, so suffocate. So it's really interesting. Those kinds of things those kinds of things would lead ancients to think this might be an entrance to the underworld. So I think the most common theory, at least if you're thinking about Heracles as a Greek hero, is that it was on the very southern tip of Greece, which is not where we picked our wine from, but that's where, if you're kind of thinking about these myths geographically, most of the ancient um, sort of cartographers would put the entrance to the underworld in the southern Peloponnese Peninsula. So when Heracles goes to the underworld, he does what anybody has to do, alive or dead, cross the river Styx. And the ferryman, of course, the ferryman Charon, takes the souls across the underworld. And so Heracles has the same thing happen to him that Aeneas will later happen, which is when he gets in the boat basically like sinks underwater because he's so big and he's an actual person, right? You're not supposed to go to the underworld if you're alive. Okay, so this is kind of there's a parallel here with some of these other mortal heroes who make it into the underworld alive. So he gets across the Styx. One of the things that happens to him there, which is really interesting, is he runs into the hero Theseus, and these two guys are great friends going way, way, way back, and they continue to be friends throughout their, kind of throughout their lives. And Theseus is there with his friend, a guy Pirithous, who's come up in some of our myths and our ancient wines clubs as well. And Pirithous and Theseus had made a bet when they were younger that one of them could basically marry the most beautiful and the woman in the world, who at that time was Helen of Sparta, and that the other one could marry Persephone, who was the queen of the underworld. So these are both ridiculous ideas, but Theseus tried to seduce Hera and Helen, and was rebuffed. And Pirithous had, I think, the more difficult sort of bet to seduce Persephone, goddess of the underworld, the queen of the underworld. So they went down there, and they got caught out. Hades realized what they were up to, and he asked them to sit down in the waiting room and trap them in a basically stone seats that are kind of like seats of forgetfulness. So they're basically trapped there in the underworld for all eternity. And so Heracles gets there, and he sees his friend Theseus and actually rescues him, but he leaves Pirithous there. So as far as we know, Pirithous was still stuck in the stone seat of forgetfulness in the underworld. So he gets through all of that, and he gets to the guard dog Cerberus. So Dana mentioned Orthrus earlier, the two-headed dog of Geryon. So Cerberus is in that same lineage. So he's actually the brother. This three-headed dog of the underworld is the brother of Orthrus and of the Lernaean Hydra, who was one of our, I think, the second labor that we had in the first of these two clubs.
It's a lot of heads, man. That's so many heads, right? Look at that lineage. It's amazing.
Be a good trivia question. How many heads are on the monsters that the Heracles
Yeah.
coming in? Yeah, what's the number? And he's the the father of the Nemean lion. Of course, is another one of the first laborers. So this is a whole lineage of monsters. So if you missed our what was the name of that club, guys? The we had the Chimera
Oh,
and the Sphinx and the it's like monsters of the
I want to say like Monsters and Myths or something like that.
myths and yeah.
I can't remember the name of the club, but yeah, we had a whole as most of you probably
That's
remember.
what happens when you do 30 clubs, guys.
Yeah,
Just yeah.
It was
38.
of beasts and berries,
Of
Jeff.
Visa berries.
That
Thank
was
you for that.
34. Yeah,
Yes,
we're
30.
coming up on 40,
Yeah,
Dana.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God.
so when the clubs start surpassing all of us in age, I think we're getting to that point. At least for me, we're getting up there pretty fast. Couple years here. We're probably past you by a ways now, Ryan. So anyway, so he gets to Cerberus and he ends up having to strangle him as we see happen in a lot of these stories like the Nemean lion, and he brings him back to Eurystheus, and he's subsequently released. He has to, obviously, because all of these subsequent myths have Cerberus in them. So he gets him back, basically completes the labor, and brings the dog back to the underworld, restores him there. So that's the story of the of Heracles on the Roman side, Heracles in the underworld with Kara. So most difficult of the labors. And of course, this is one of the ones that Aristides thought there's no way he'll ever come back from this. He won't even figure out how to get down there, and there's no way he'll ever come back. Of course, he does. So, and in that way, you're kind of proving proving your immortality as well. So. All right. So I think with that, we'll move on to the fourth wine,
Yep,
which
that's right. That's me. I'll jump in here, Jeff. Thanks. So the wine number 4 of the club was the 2022 Enops Apla White Blend. So this is from around the region of Drama, in Thrace in northern Greece, so kind of northeastern Greece. And this is a blend, a white blend of three varieties: Malaguzia, 50%, Assyrtiko, 30%, and Vidiano, 20%. Malaguzia is a grape that was almost extinct probably in the mid 20th century, was kind of rediscovered by a few enologists, viticulturalists, who then began to replant it and began to popularize it again. It brings kind of this nice midway, a little bit of like tropical sort of floral tones to it. Not quite as floral as like a Malvasia, which the names are kind of similar, but I think there's some debate about there actually being a parentage somewhere in that line there. But Malvasia is different. For me, it definitely presents differently in the glass. A little more crisp, a little more mineral elements to it, and but again, it brings some nice kind of peachy stone fruit there as well. Um, and then Assyrtiko is the second grape there. Like I said, 30%. Found all over Greece, obviously famously found in Santorini as well, or I should say most famously. But now being planted all over Greece. I think we talked a little bit about that on the last with the last club. I think we had Assyrtiko. We may have mentioned it. Or at least I know we've discussed it before, but this is kind of the grape that's really being sort of seen as like potentially the future of Greek white wine. They're really doing a lot of experiments all over the country with it. Every winery that we visit is like, oh, we're doing a Assyrtiko now. You got to try it. So, really kind of a interesting grape that we're actually seeing here in the United States as well. There's a couple wineries that are planting it here in California. And I've also heard that it's being planted a little bit in Oregon as well. So there's a lot of kind of experimentation going on with Assyrtiko, which brings this nice, again, kind of very versatile profile. You get a lot of citrus, a lot of kind of concentrated, sort of like yellow, white fruit, kind of peachy, sort of orchard stuff going there as well. But you always a really nice balance between, again, like kind of vibrant acidity and the texture there. And then finally, Vidiano. Interestingly enough, this is a grape that is of Cretan origin as well. And it's kind of interesting to see it planted up in the north there. You don't see it that often up there. Definitely better known for being from the islands, from either the Cyclades or Rhodes. On the island of Rhodes also grows Vidiano, but most famously from Crete. But in this case, Vidiano gives again a little bit of texture. It can give yeah, a little bit more of that kind of appley kind of brightness as well. It's usually a grape that's blended as well. You don't see it stand on its own a huge amount, similar to like Greek Cretan Reds, where there's always a little bit this kind of offset, where one grape will play one role and the other one plays, this kind of counterbalance. Vidiano often is blended with either Vilana, um, or a number of other the kind of the native Cretan white varieties. But yeah, this is just like again a very like versatile, lovely white blend as well, similar to the Colzefali Marbro Tragano. Something that's pretty easy to pair with, has some nice kind of sort of like some sweeter, riper fruits, but then it's not something that's like super like oily or rich in the glass. It has a little bit, it's light on its feet. And it was definitely something that I think, shows really nicely alongside some, salads, cheeses, seafood dishes, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think white blends like this this is kind of like a pan-Hellenic white blend, I would say, because honestly, you can see Malaguzia all over Greece, you see Assyrtiko all over Greece, and clearly Vidiano makes its way from top to bottom of the country as well. So it's they're all native varieties, so it's kind of cool to see these hit the market as a distinctly Greek, but not like bulked out with like Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or something like that, which would kind of take it in a different direction. So these are wines that I think they're going to serve really nicely going forward. Obviously, fingers crossed on tariffs and things like that, but it's served really nicely in that kind of like interesting, approachable, but complex sort of white blends. But yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, to harken
I
to what Ryan was saying, I think, 10, 15 years ago, you would see Chardonnay blended into this, and
Yeah,
now I think there's such a confidence in Greek wines, in winemakers, where they're like, you know what, we believe in our indigenous varieties, and you know what, we're gonna make a blend with our grapes and not bring grapes in, varieties that come from France or other areas of the world.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
confidence is a good way to put it, Tia. I really agree with that. Yeah.
was gonna say that's my typo there on seat to go, Ryan, not Ryan's. That was my probably my cat on my lap at 4:30 a.m. My cat that's actually descended directly from the Nemean lion, I think. Hence the disruption.
That is a one-headed cat. I've seen that cat.
Yeah, same line.
Hey, I'm gonna hazard a video here. Here we go. Hi. Hey everybody.
Marvelous.
Admit it, man.
Hello. Um, this munchkin is kind of drawing me away. I know we have one more wine to go, but I think I am gonna sign off because we're getting a quiet moment here. But just wanted to say hi to everybody, and again, thanks for joining us this evening. And I'm gonna probably bounce at this point. I apologize for being a little bit all over the place, but
Maybe stretch.
No problem at all, Dana. We'll
All
uh
right.
we'll we'll take it home from here, and good to see you and Junie as well.
you
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
are in, and members are in good hands as always. All right, everybody, have a great evening. This was so much fun, and we'll catch you all soon. Come to Greece. Come to Greece. Come to our next meeting. These guys will tell you all about it. I'll see you there. Okay.
And then obviously I mean not obviously, but just to let you know because we had six labors and four club wines. The Thrace here you probably remember from the Mayors of Diomedes. That's a callback to that labor. If you're wondering how did we get to Thrace when we were just in the underworld, that's the connection there. So with that, we're gonna take it to just a quick kind of overview. We'll let you read up on this if you're interested in the write-up, but there's a whole kind of afterlife sort of Nachleben to the myth of Heracles after he completes the labor. So he's not done. I mean, this is the greatest of all the greatest and most interesting and kind of most diverse of all the Greek heroes. So this is just a reference to kind of indirectly how he died. So his wife, his second wife, I don't know if it's his second, but one of his latter wives, if he had more than two, Deanira, they were trying to cross the river and the centaur Nessus. We had a Hawaiian club on centaurs and these kind of symbols of barbarity and savagery and whatnot. He basically he says he'll carry the Deanira across, but then he tries to run off with her. So Heracles kills the centaur, but with the centaur's dying breath, he says to Deanira, "Hey, take some of my blood, and if you ever suspect Heracles of being unfaithful, just put some of this on his clothing; it'll cure him of that." And so, of course, later on, this circles back around, and she does suspect him of being unfaithful, and he's asking for a new new shirt to conduct a sacrifice in. So she makes him one, and then she dips the blood in there, and then he, in this kind of dying agony, basically begs to be burned alive. And it's at that point that Zeus steps in and basically, does the apotheosis and deifies him. So essentially he becomes immortal and then actually gets a constellation. And as we explored in the write-up as well, I think it's kind of cool to have a list there of all the different constellations actually that are connected with the myth of Heracles. So a lot of the different labors are in the sky there as well. So really cool image too. So with that, we'll go to the first of our two. Honestly, really cool. Both these wines, really cool. Special offer wines. So I think T, you were gonna.
Yeah, yeah. So this wine is from Artuque. So they're in the north of Rioja. And what's really unique about this wine is I'm sure many of you guys have had, Riojas before. And this is just a new type of Rioja that's made in a more Burgundian style. So it's 80% Tempranillo, 16% Graciano, and 4% Viura, which is white grapes. So it's a blend of white and red grapes. And it's grown on sandstone soils in the north of Rioja. And unlike other Riojas, which is, very extracted, aged in American new oak, I wonder what, how much Rioja is whether the EU is gonna put a tariff on American oak, but that's neither here nor there. But this is like made in a it's done in stainless steel and then a little bit of French oak, and it's incredibly elegant. It's really smooth, bright, pretty, floral. It's like it's very silky, it like kind of glides across your tongue. And it's all from one single vineyard. So he wanted to really capture the terroir of his vineyard right above the river.
Cool. All right, so the second one of these, I mentioned earlier the connection with the underworld. So that one, the last one is Dana had spoken about the apples of the Hesperides and the Geryon story as well. Both have a kind of a connection to that area of Spain and beyond. So we wanted something from the far west of Europe, and that hence the connection there. And this wine here, the 2021 Togni Rebaioli Martina, which is from Lombardy, Italy, which is actually and it's located in the region of Val Camonica, which is famous for I think there are 300,000 or so petroglyphs in a series of caves here. Caves which are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. These caves go back to the end of the last ice age, so Neolithic period caves. So it's just a really cool connection with kind of ancient history, archaeology. There was actually a Roman settlement here as well, and then a medieval settlement. So it goes all the way back, continues from the modern age all the way back to the end of the last ice age, and then the connection here with caves. So thanks to T for sourcing this. We were looking at all kinds of different wines, cave wines, and this is one that I'm so glad you came across because it's a really cool, spectacular wine. And I have not been to Val Camonica, but it is really high on my list now after seeing the images of where this is. I mean, it looks unbelievable. It's right in the Alps in eastern Lombardy, right, which is the region where Milan is in the lower lands, but up right in the Alps there, kind of west of Venice. So definitely a cool spot. Um, for maybe we can all go there at some point. And the grape here is really interesting as well. So Urbano is a an interesting like indigenous Italian variety. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Italy has the most sort of known indigenous varieties, right? Just the most known grapes that are distinct, genetically kind of distinctive grapes, many of which can be traced back to the ancient Greeks and Romans. The Greeks who brought a lot of the grapes and the wine making technology, and then the Romans who had their own grapes there and planted using that. Some of those grapes that the Greeks brought, but a lot of their own grapes as well. And this is made in a really interesting style. So it's essentially, if you look at it, it's kind of, I think you guys, T, you were telling me that they were having trouble, or somebody made the decision not to market it as a rosé.
Yeah, they weren't sure whether market as a rosé or red.
So it's either a really light rosé or a dark, a light red or a dark rosé is kind of where it fits.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think from my experience tasting it, it works more like a red, like a light red, and kind of fits in that family of reds that we really, I mean, those of us in AWG really love these light kind of delicate but have a lot of character, really light red wines, and a lot of them come from northern Italy, in particular, and so this kind of to me fits into that category. And it's really interesting. So it's called, I think, by the Italians, this is a kind of Lambrusco. And most everybody probably knows what Lambrusco is, right? You associate it with that kind of associate it, for me at least, as it's a red wine. It has a little bit of fizz to it. You get it at a pizza parlor or something like that. Um, I think a lot of times it's seen as a kind of unserious wine that's good with food. It's
Yeah,
easy.
and kind of semi-sweet
Yeah, it
sometimes
takes a
too.
little chilled. It just kind
Yeah.
of more casual flavor. But Lambrusco actually is one of about 60 varieties that are considered part of the Lambrusco family. So it's not a single variety. It's actually a family of grapes that are really closely related. Again, kind of thinking about like the antiquity of this grape, right? So it's branched out with various clones and varieties that you could say, well, there's actually 60 kinds of Lambrusco. So this is actually one of fits into that family of Lambrusco grapes, but is kind of distinct enough to be named and considered its own grape, which is super interesting. And so the wine itself is, I think it's basically just lightly pressed, right, to get this light. It's a red wine. The winemaker whose name is here, Enrico Toni Rebaioli is the name of the winemaker. I think up until two started making wine with this grape, I think 2012, and then originally was just making a red wine out of it. But in 2015, he started experimenting and tried out this more kind of, again, light red or dark rosé style. And so just pressing it very gently, right, just to get this color of wine, this body of wine, and then it's aged all in stainless steel. So but I love this wine. I think it has a lot of like, strawberry, raspberry, um those kind of forward light fruit, light red fruits in it, but then it also has like, I think too, you found this as well, like a really kind of earthy, almost like savory quality to it, which I thought was really cool. More than you would expect when you look at the wine and kind of smell like this wine has a lot of character and expresses itself really well. So I'm excited to try this wine, with some different kinds of food, some cheese,
Yeah.
and I think it would stand up against honestly just about any kind of like red sauce, as well as kind of even maybe like some fish. So I think of like that kind of matching color with color. You could probably do this with some kind of salmon even though it's a mountain wine. So yeah, really great. I like this a lot. It was a really great selection to finish
I
off.
mean, I think people think it might be related to Gasparosa, which is a grape that's used in Lambrusco. which is a darker, more savory grape. And the way I love Jeff's picture because he slightly chilled it. You can see it on the bottle, and that's the perfect way to have it. And um, I mean, honestly, just because I was in Hawaii recently, I mean that you can even have that with like poke, like a spicy tuna poke, and it'd be great.
Yeah, and on the label here is one of the runes, or I don't rune's not the right word. It looks like a rune. But one of the petroglyphs that it does look like a rune, right? Back, but it's one of the petroglyphs from the caves there in Valcamonica. So I haven't seen the other labels from this producer, but I'm told, or apparently he's used different petroglyphs on the different labels. So yeah, kind of cool connection to.
It's always cool to have wine that the producer is the only producer of that variety, which is this case. They're the only winery commercializing, I should say, this variety.
You had
So
that
because
tour, right, with the Santa Marina,
yep, same with yeah, exactly the Santa Mary
Santa Maria.
um
So
from yeah, Santor. Absolutely. Yeah, and apparently this is a difficult variety to grow, from what my research showed me. It's probably finicky. I mean, there's usually a reason when something starts to die out. Where they're like, oh, like this thing always, gets mildew or doesn't flower well, or it doesn't, do XYZ very well. So, grape growers are a practical bunch. And yeah, sometimes, it's a labor of love, clearly. So.
so Dana's mentioned a couple times. I think some of you already signed up, but if you're interested, we still have a couple spots open for our tour to Greece. I know there's a lot of kind of, anxiety, uncertainty in the air around a lot of things right now, but we're still going and you're welcome to join us. So if it's something that sounds great to you, just reach out to us and we can give you all the details. And then finally, as always, we'd love to sell you more of the wines that you've been enjoying in the tasting. If you didn't get a chance to do the special offers, you want to try those. And this is a kind of a special offer now is that you have the opportunity to buy these at pre-tariff prices because these are all in the United States already. So you're getting an automatic 10% discount on anything you issue your I say that with kind of a heavier cynical heart, but in addition to the 15% you already got with your ancient wines club membership. So definitely just, as usual, if you're in the GLS service area, you can add up to 8 bottles. We won't charge anything extra for the shipping. And then if you're outside that service area, it's $5 just to cover our cost with FedEx. $5 a bottle, which usually works out to about the same as with the shipping and everything, like with the discount and stuff like that. So yeah, so stay tuned. We're all kind of in a little bit of flux, in shock here with in terms of what these tariffs are going to do, and I don't know, maybe they'll cancel them tomorrow. We don't know, but in terms of how it's going to affect everything, but we'll certainly do our best to to keep you informed and provide the same sorts of wines we've been doing all along. It's just going to be a little bit of maybe a little bit of transition there. We'll see what happens, but um so yeah, do you guys have anything else to add before we sign off tonight? So
That pretty much covers it from my side, I think.
Yeah, same here.
So as always, I think it's a great club, and we're happy to and grateful to have all of you as members and joining us for this event and for past events and for future events. And if you ever have any questions or need anything wine related, we're here.
Yeah, just reach out to us. We're always here. So
So
thank you, everybody.
perfect. Yeah, we'll sign off there. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the night.
thank you.